Welcome, firefighters. I'm so glad you've joined Fire Drill Fridays today. And don't forget to let me know where you're coming in from. Leave that in the comments because I like hearing from you. Well, today we are in Port Arthur, Texas. Port Arthur is what the climate crisis really looks like. And we're going to be getting up close and personal details about just how the fossil fuel industry has dire impacts on people's lives and their communities. We're going to be going now to meet John Beard Jr. He's a resident of Port Arthur, has been all his life, used to work in the oil industry. He is the founder and CEO of the Port Arthur Community Action Network. So let's give a listen to some of the ways that people are feeling the impacts of living in Port Arthur. You must be the man, John Beard Jr.
That's him. I'm here. How you doing?
Pleased to meet you, happy
Fonda. Great.
to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me for Fire Drill Fridays. Before we start talking about the significance of where we are, tell me a little about yourself. What got you into working for environmental justice?
Well, first of all, I was born and raised in this town over 60 plus years ago. I'm kind of close with my age. Lived on the fence line, born and raised on the fence line, could see some of the largest refineries in the country from the front door, the kitchen window, in the backyard.
What does the fence line mean?
Well, the fence line is the fence separating the refinery or a petrochemical facility, tank farm the other, from the community itself. And I lived right across the street from what used to be a tank farm for the largest refinery in the country now. I'm second generation refinery worker, second generation union. And after I retired, I decided that I wanted to do something else because having spent 9 years on city council, working with the industry and the community, and seeing the disparity between what they say versus what they do, and then the harmful effects it was having on us in terms of the pollution, I decided to get involved and try to make a difference. And so that led to me forming my nonprofit, Port Arthur Community Action Network, and getting involved in this. And it's taken me a lot of places to do a lot of things. But the key thing is to bring some attention to the problems we have here and hopefully relieve some of the suffering that people have, because we'll sacrifice community.
Tell me the significance of where we are here in Port Arthur, Texas, in terms of the climate crisis.
Well, we're right here on the boardwalk, right across from City Hall and the county courthouse. And this ship channel, Sabine Nature's Waterway, ties Port Arthur to the Gulf of Mexico. And what's significant about it is when there are storms in the Gulf, that sea level rises. And they don't have to be hurricanes. By the way, I don't like saying that word. I think about that word like you think about Beetlejuice. You say it 3 times, they appear magically. Oh. Well, I don't like to say that too much. But when those storms that begin with an H are out there, this seawall protects us from the sea, because just across the way there's Lake Sabine, and just a few miles past that is the Gulf of Mexico. So it doesn't take a lot to flood low-lying areas like Port Arthur. You'll get to see maybe later, it's perfectly flat from ground to sky. And the least little wind, or even winds like this today, can raise that sea level. Well, that's a threat. That's an imminent danger to people here, because we've had numerous storms that have hurt. As a matter of fact, 5 major hurricanes in the last 17 years. Wow. So it's been very devastating, and a lot of it, in fact, I believe is caused by climate change and global warming.
Sure, yeah. I understand they want to put some kind of an expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure here. Tell me about that.
Yes, they're looking at trying to build a third LNG in the Port Arthur environment.
What is LNG?
Liquefied natural gas. It's really not natural gas. We prefer to call it methane. Methane's worse for the atmosphere, for global warming, than carbon dioxide. And they want to build a third facility, which is in the Port Arthur environment. The present one, Golden Pass, is being converted to an export facility. And a current one that's here, Cheniere LNG, right across the way in Louisiana, is also one of the largest exporters of methane or natural gas in the entire country. And now they want to put a third one here. Well, there are emissions from them. And unfortunately, Louisiana doesn't regulate their emissions nearly as stiff as Texas, and Texas doesn't do anything at all, hardly. So now we're looking at a further sacrifice to this community, breathing in the fumes and vapors from a third LNG that would be here to export a very poisonous and dangerous gas to other parts of the world, when we need to be looking at renewable energy. We need to go a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. How many people are employed here working in these fossil fuel infrastructures that we're looking at?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because Port Arthur has some of the highest unemployment in the state.
Oh, really?
You know, down in the valley in Brownsville, they have no petrochemicals, and yet our unemployment is just below, if not rivaling theirs.
Really?
And unfortunately, I think it's a case of environmental racism. This is largely a Black and Hispanic town. But the bedroom communities that surround Port Arthur, which are basically little white, have very little unemployment. They have some of the highest home and property values, while yet, if you see driving through Port Arthur, you don't see that prosperity. You don't see where the $1 billion that they want to put to deepen and widen the ship channel are going to help us. You don't see where the tens of billions in petrochemical expansion have helped this city. And so if it doesn't help us, then why should we continue to be hurt, continue to be sacrificed when we have no gain or benefit? You know, when you look at home value and property value, it's the lowest in the region. When you look at per capita income, it's the lowest. When you look at poverty, 27 to 30% of the people that are here, a city of 57,000 live at or below the poverty line. Now, the next site I'd like to take you to take a look at is Oxbow calcinating, what I call the worst serial polluter in the whole state of Texas, and I'll tell you why when we get there.
Okay. So, John, explain to us what it is we're dealing with here. What are we looking at?
Well, we're right here on the Sabine Nature's Waterway and right across the way from Oxbow Calcinating, which is a Koch brothers company. And
the name of the company is Oxbow.
Right, that's the name of
I
it,
see,
Oxbow
okay.
Calcinating.
Okay.
And basically what they do is take the petroleum coke that comes from those tall derrick-like structures you see there. And matter of fact, you could probably, if you look in the distance by that rack where there's some piles of that petroleum coke, it's really like coal. But what they're doing, they run it through these furnaces and burn off the pollutants. And that burn off goes into the air we breathe. Matter of fact, that's why I say they're the worst serial polluter in all the state of Texas. Over 11,000 tons of sulfur dioxide, trioxide, and particulate matter that's very dangerous to the lungs and to your respiratory system.
Why serial polluter?
Well, because they've been allowed to do this unchecked for over 20 years. They've been grandfathered in by the state of Texas to allow them to legally do this. But legal or not, we know that this is dangerous. We know that it's harmful to people. So why should they be allowed to do this? They should be like any other industry. They should have regulations that cause them to lessen the amount of pollution they put out. But instead, they just go on unabated, and that's not good.
I've been meeting with somebody who's running for a railroad commission. One of the reasons they're allowed to do this, I'm sure you'll agree and that you know this better than I, is because the Railroad Commission, which, you know, when Texas hit oil and gas and that became their big industry, the Railroad Commission was asked to govern, not the railroad, to regulate the oil and gas industry. And the commissioners are people from the oil and gas industry.
Exactly.
From the very industry they're supposed to regulate. And they don't.
No,
they don't regulate.
And that's the whole problem. That's worse than having people who know nothing about the industry at all. They write rules that are favorable to them. They write rules that allow industry to continue to pollute and continue to make money. And then you have sacrificed communities like mine that not only have to breathe and deal with the pollution, but they don't get any kind of benefit from it. They don't get the jobs. Not that we want a trade-off like that, because it's not good. Our lives are more important. But we don't get any of the benefits, and yet that's their big selling card. But they don't hire people like people in Port Arthur.
Would you say that Port Arthur is a sacrifice zone?
Oh, most definitely we're a sacrifice zone.
Why?
Because America, to have oil and gas, to have as much production as we come from this one little area, we're not big as Houston, but in the southeast Texas area, Port Arthur in particular, I dare say that if you waved the magic wand and made all this disappear, that the economy of Texas and the United States would be severely affected. Port Arthur's motto used to be, "We oil the world." Well, we still do. There's a significant amount of refining capacity here with the largest refinery in the country, 2 other smaller ones, almost 1.5 million barrels of capacity a day. And that's substantial when you think about it. Yes, we are sacrificed so that America can have oil and gas and cars, can do all of that.
So what's being sacrificed?
Our lives and our health. And you know, I've had family members that are suffering from this environment. When they leave here and go to other parts of the country, they don't have the headaches and the watery eyes and the migraines and all of that. They go away. But within hours of coming back home, they come right back. So it's got to be something in the air. It's got to be.
Listen, I'm curious, in your opinion, if President Biden declared a climate emergency, what kind of an impact could it have here?
Well, the great part about him doing it, and I really wish he would, is that it will help the transition. We need to make a transition that's not just simply about words, but actually getting out of the fossil fuel business and getting into clean, green, renewable energies. It will also invoke certain acts of Congress that will enable us to do that. We can do it bigger, better, and faster when he puts that into play. But right now, all we're doing is allowing the petrochemical industry to continue to extend the age of oil. And in doing that, we're not going to make the transition.
Could his declaring a climate emergency have an impact, if he chose, on the potential expansion of the oil facilities that they're trying to put here?
Well, most definitely it would. But those same companies can also be a part of the transition. We've got to do better. I see it as being no different than when people were in horses and buggies and then Henry Ford made the first car. We can make that transition. Life is about change and being adaptable. And we have to adapt to this because the future of our planet and the future of humanity and humankind rest on what we do here. So I really seriously, and I've been to DC a couple of times, we demand that he do this. He said he's going to be the environmental president. Well, we need him to do it. Port Arthur needs him to do it. And we're not going to continue to allow ourselves to be sacrificed in order for the oligarchs of oil and gas to continue to make money and their stock and shareholders while we suffer and our quality of life is degraded, even our life expectancy.
You know, it's so low to the water, it looks so vulnerable to extreme weather events. Has it been severely impacted by extreme weather events?
Oh, yes, by all means. When Hurricane Harvey hit, even though it didn't hit Port Arthur exactly, it was 60 miles in that direction. This water level rose so much that where we're standing now is probably under 8 to 10 feet of water. The refineries were flooded even. Basically, these refineries were shut down. They were weeks, if not months, getting back up to operating capacity as they were beforehand.
And does that release a lot of toxins?
Oh, yes, it does. They're allowed to dump, you know, the in-plant water, which is one of the facilities. Total dumped over 100 million gallons into this Sabine Nature's waterway. And this Sabine Nature's waterway goes into the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, God, yeah.
They flare in all of the black smoke and soot, and it goes on for hours. And in starting up equipment, it's rather noisy. So we've got all of this. And just right across the way from here, you can't see them because of the facilities, but people live in close proximity to this.
And they're not supposed to be flaring like that. But again, the
Well, once
railroad
again,
commissioner just doesn't enforce the rules.
the state of Texas basically says all they need to get a waiver on that is to just simply say, oh, we had an emergency, we lost a piece of equipment, or we had to do this to prevent a fire or an explosion. And they say, oh, okay, but nobody tells us to stop breathing. We can't hold our breath until they get through and then, okay, we can breathe now.
So since Harvey, has anything been done to make this more secure?
Not really. There's been some talk about having what they call an Ike Dike or a coastal spine that would run virtually from Galveston through to Orange, but that hasn't been constructed yet, and it's going to take some time to do it.
How do you think environmental racism impacts decisions that are made here in Port Arthur?
Well, I'll put it to you like this. You see anything like this in Beverly Hills?
No.
Do you see anything like this in Park Avenue in New York? Or in River Oaks in Houston? No, you don't see that. They come to communities like Port Arthur and like Lake Charles, Louisiana, just an hour behind us here, or the Freeport and other places along the Texas Gulf Coast, because they are, as I've heard said, the path of least resistance. They're largely poor, minority. They don't have a means to fight back. They can't hire lawyers. They can't hire the researchers to tell them the dangers. So these guys come in with their, you know, suits and their hats and all, and come and tell you about the wonderful things they're going to do, but you never see them. Whether it's intentional or not, the effect is still the same. You're hurting people who don't have a means to protect and defend themselves. And instead of you trying to do less of what's causing that, you want to do even more.
Where are we headed next?
Okay, well, next we got a little bit of a special treat, because just as this canal turns and goes south, you'll see where that third LNG I was telling you about by Sempra Energy is being proposed to be built. Matter of fact, they relocated the highway off the edge of the ship channel to allow them to have access. Then you'll see ExxonMobil's Golden Pass, which is being converted. And then you'll see one of the largest exporters of LNG, or liquid methane, or liquefied natural gas in America, and that is Cheniere Energy's Sabine Pass facility.
Okay. Gee, I can't wait. So, John, tell me what it is we're looking at. What's the story here?
Well, right here you see two of the one of the largest LNG facilities in North America in terms of its output. 78% of the natural gas that comes through here is headed for Europe. And then you pivot over this way and you can see Golden Pass LNG, which is a subsidiary of ExxonMobil, that's being converted from an import facility to an export facility. With the abundance of gas that they found here due to fracking, now we want to be world players and sell this poisonous, toxic gas that's a major contributor to climate change to other countries. While we're trying to get out of it, we're trying to get someone else into it. Kind of reminds me of the tobacco industry a little bit.
Yes.
But that's what we have here. And then there's a third LNG proposed further down the ship channel that my organization is fighting very diligently to keep from coming in here, fighting their air permits and looking at also trying to address the financial end. If they don't have the money to do it, they can't do it. And right now they're working real hard to find financial backers. But we need to let them know that them backing these kinds of companies is furthering as a sacrifice in the sacrifice zone. And essentially they're murderers. They're putting poison into the atmosphere. They're causing global warming, which is causing that sea level to rise, which is an imminent danger and a threat to people all along the Gulf Coast. So, you know, that's what we have here.
All these derricks, what are those for?
Those cranes are for construction. This thing is in wide open in its construction phase to put in the necessary infrastructure for gas export.
Export.
Right.
We have to stop exporting.
We definitely have to stop it. If we know it's bad and we shouldn't be using it, why are we continuing to use it to send to other people?
Right.
Producing more oil and gas doesn't lessen dependence because most of that which is being produced is being exported. So what are we doing it for? Simply to make money, simply to help the oil and gas folk and their board of directors and stock and shareholders make more money, but at the expense of us all.
I want to talk about the health in Port Arthur. Do you have any idea what the cancer rates are there? Or asthma and lung disease, for example?
Well, I've been told that Port Arthur has twice the state and national average for cancer. We were told that back in 2010 when Port Arthur was declared an environmental justice showcase city by the US EPA. But since that time, no one, not the city, not the county government, not the state government, not even the federal government, has come down here to study the cause to that effect. But they also told us a couple of things, one of which was that cancer rate is really higher than that. But they're only allowed to say it's only twice the national average and state average. Then on top of that, they added to the fact that it's not just cancer, but lung, heart, and kidney disease. Well, all of that's interrelated. If you're not able to breathe and respirate properly, your organs are going to suffer because of insufficient oxygen. And it's going to, then the chemicals are going to cause physiological changes because we are what we breathe. What's outside affects the inside of us. It affects us.
And they can't just move away, right?
No,
because
they can't move away.
They can't afford.
You know, a lot of people say when I bring these things up, Jane, that, you know, well, if you don't like it, why don't you move? Well, maybe someone like me who's worked in industry and been able to have a good job and build up some means to do it can move. But why should I have to move? I have a right to breathe clean air no matter where I am. And if these companies can't stop polluting and clean up their act, why should they be allowed to be in business? And why should people who may not have the financial means be forced to move and relocate? Where are they going to go? You know. Well,
what gives you hope? I mean, you've been a fighter against all this for a long time. What gives you hope? What keeps you going?
The hope of the fact of something that a friend of mine said years ago. It's easy to fight when you know how the story is going to end. And we know that this is going to end in a way which is going to be good for us. We will save the earth. We will save humanity. We will help this transition, but it's going to take every one of us fighting and working together. So that gives me hope to get up in the morning. The energy that people younger than me and you both bring into this and the enthusiasm makes me hopeful for the future and know that without hope, there is no future. So I have to keep working today so that my son and my son's son's sons or daughters will have a future that is meaningful, significant, and have a beautiful planet in which to enjoy that life.
It's been a real pleasure to meet you, John.